we're just scratching the surface. That's literally what we're doing. I'm sure this building is still hiding many, many secrets inside.
For centuries, millions of people have climbed the steps, circled the base, and photographed the silhouette of El Castillo without ever suspecting what actually lies inside it, or beneath it. The pyramid that dominates every postcard from Mexico's Yucatan Peninsula is not what it appears to be. It is not a single monument raised in one generation by one ruler. It is a nesting doll built from solid limestone, one structure wrapped around another, wrapped around a third. And underneath all of it, sealed away in total darkness, sits a body of water no human being has ever laid eyes on. This is the strange, layered truth behind one of the most recognizable buildings on the planet. Chichén Itzá rose to prominence between roughly the 9th and 13th centuries, becoming one of the most influential cities in the Maya world. It functioned as a hub of politics, religion, and trade, pulling in visitors and merchants from across the region. Today, it draws a very different kind of crowd. Tourists by the millions, drawn by its UNESCO World Heritage status and its place among the new 7 wonders of the world. At the center of the site stands El Castillo, also known as the Temple of Kukulkan, a 9-tiered pyramid roughly 30 meters tall, with a small temple perched at its summit. The building was engineered with an obsession for precision. For stairways climb its 4 faces, each containing 91 steps. Multiply that by 4 and add the single step at the temple platform on top, and the total comes to 365. 1 step for every day of the solar year. Twice annually, at the spring and fall equinoxes, the setting sun casts a chain of triangular shadows along the edge of the northern staircase, creating the illusion of a massive serpent slithering down the pyramid toward a carved stone serpent head waiting at the bottom. Thousands still gather every year to watch it happen, exactly as it has for roughly 1,000 years. But long before drones and laser scanners ever touched the site, a discovery made with nothing more than careful eyes and hand tools quietly rewrote what archaeologists thought they knew about the pyramid. In the 1930s, during a period when Mexican institutions were pouring resources into documenting the nation's great pre-Hispanic ruins, workers carrying out structural repairs on El Castillo noticed something was off. The interior didn't behave the way a solid mass of stone should. There were inconsistencies in the core that suggested the pyramid wasn't one continuous build from foundation to summit. Following that thread, researchers cut a narrow tunnel through the outer shell and eventually broke into a sealed doorway. On the other side waited a temple that had not been touched since the day the Maya themselves closed it off and built directly on top of it. Inside that hidden chamber were 2 objects that remain, to this day, among the most striking pieces of art ever recovered from a Maya site. The first was a throne carved into the shape of a crouching jaguar, painted a rich red and studded with inlaid jade meant to recreate the spots of the animal's coat. In Maya belief, the jaguar was tied to the night, to the underworld, and to raw physical power, a fitting seat for whoever held the highest authority in the city. The fact that this throne sat hidden inside a private chamber, rather than displayed for public crowds, suggests it wasn't decoration. It was almost certainly the actual seat of power used in rituals meant for only the highest members of Chichén Itzá's priesthood or ruling class. Beside the throne sat a second figure, a reclining stone form with bent knees and a turned head, balancing a flat dish across its stomach. Figures like this appear at multiple sites across the region, and while scholars still debate their exact purpose, they are widely believed to have served as receptacles for ritual offerings, food, incense, or other gifts meant for the gods. Finding this figure positioned right next to the jaguar throne only strengthens the sense that this buried room wasn't some forgotten storage space. It was an active ceremonial chamber, deliberately sealed and preserved rather than destroyed, the moment a new structure rose to enclose it. That single discovery forced historians to reconsider something basic about how the Maya approached construction. Instead of tearing down an old temple to clear space for a new one, they often built straight over it, wrapping the earlier sacred structure in a fresh shell rather than erasing it. The temple wasn't lost. It was entombed, protected by the very building that replaced it. And it turned out that this had happened more than once. Decades later, researchers, using far more advanced scanning methods, identified traces of yet another structure, older still, buried even deeper than the one found in the 1930s. This innermost core is believed to stand around 10 meters tall, roughly a third the height of the pyramid visitors see today, and is thought to date back to sometime between the 6th and 8th centuries, hundreds of years before the outer shell was ever built. Because this layer could not be reached by tunneling, scientists had to rely on indirect imaging to confirm it existed at all, mapping subtle differences in stone density and construction material buried deep inside the pyramid's core. Put together, El Castillo turns out to be 3 pyramids in one. The outermost shell, the one every visitor sees and climbs toward during the equinox, dates to the city's height of power. Inside that sits the temple discovered in the 1930s, home to the Jaguar throne. And within that sits the oldest and smallest core, representing the earliest phase of construction on this exact spot. Rather than a single monument raised by a single generation, El Castillo appears to be the product of multiple generations of Maya builders, each one adding a new layer around the sacred heart left behind by their predecessors. As remarkable as that discovery was, it turned out to be only half the story of what was hidden at this site. The other half was waiting underground, and it would take a completely different kind of science to find it. Archaeologists couldn't simply excavate beneath a monument of this age and importance. The risk of irreversible structural damage was far too high. So instead of shovels, a team turned to a geophysical method called electrical resistivity tomography. The technique works by sending a small electrical current into the ground through a grid of electrodes and measuring how easily that current travels through the material below. Solid bedrock, loose soil, and empty or water-filled cavities each resist the flow of electricity differently, and those differences can be mapped and modeled into a three-dimensional picture of what's hidden underground, without disturbing a single stone on the surface. The research was led by a geophysicist at Mexico's National Autonomous University, working with a team that had spent years adapting techniques normally used for locating groundwater or mineral deposits, so they could be applied safely to protected archaeological monuments. Before pointing their equipment at El Castillo itself, the team tested their method on a smaller, already documented pyramid nearby known as El Osario, or the High Priest Grave, which had been known since the late 19th century to sit above a natural underground cavity that explorers had physically entered and mapped over 100 years earlier. When the resistivity survey was run over El Osario, the resulting model lined up closely with what explorers had already documented by walking through the space themselves. That match gave the researchers confidence that their technique could be trusted at a site where the stakes and the scrutiny would be far higher. Only then did the team turn its instruments toward El Castillo. Electrodes were placed in a grid around the pyramid's base, sending currents into the ground and recording how they traveled through the earth beneath the entire structure. The results, published in 2015, revealed something striking: a large zone of unusually low electrical resistance sitting directly beneath the pyramid, matching almost exactly the electrical signature you'd expect from a natural cavity partially filled with water. When mapped in 3 dimensions, the anomaly lined up almost perfectly with the outline of the pyramid standing above it. In the limestone landscape of Yucatan, a cavity like that has a name the Maya would have recognized instantly. A cenote, a natural sinkhole formed when the roof of an underground cavern collapses and exposes the water table below. The peninsula has no rivers running across its surface. Its entire freshwater system flows underground, through a vast connected network of caves and channels linking sinkholes across hundreds of kilometers. Chichén Itzá is already home to one famous example, the open sinkhole known as the Sacred Cenote, long associated with ritual offerings. But the cavity beneath El Castillo is something different entirely. It has no opening anywhere on the surface. Nothing about the plaza above it gives any hint that it exists. Based on the geophysical data, it sits roughly 20 to 25 meters below the pyramid, though because no one has ever physically entered it, its precise size and shape are still being refined through further study rather than direct observation. This changes the way many researchers think about why El Castillo was built exactly where it stands. Before this discovery, most assumed its placement was dictated by practical concerns: the layout of the surrounding city, the flow of the plaza, existing pathways and structures. Now, many archaeologists lean toward a different explanation: that the hidden water source may not have been incidental at all. It may be the reason the pyramid was built on that exact spot in the first place. To understand why that matters, it helps to understand how the Maya envisioned the structure of the universe itself. Their cosmology generally described three connected layers. At the top sat the celestial realm, home to the sun, moon, and stars, whose movements were tracked with the same precision embedded into El Castillo's calendar of steps and its equinox shadow display. In the middle sat the world of the living, fields, plazas, and cities, the everyday human realm where people farmed, traded, and gathered, including the very plaza where crowds still stand each equinox to watch the serpent shadow crawl down the staircase. Below everything sat the underworld, a realm reached through caves and cenotes, associated with death, transformation, and a set of gods entirely its own. If El Castillo was deliberately raised above a hidden cenote, then the pyramid may physically represent all three of these layers compressed into a single structure: a temple pointed toward the heavens at its summit, a human plaza at its base, and sealed away in permanent darkness beneath the foundation, a natural gateway into the underworld itself. The fact that El Osario shows this same pattern, a pyramid built directly above a known cavity, suggests this wasn't a coincidence unique to El Castillo. It may reflect a broader and deeply intentional relationship between Maya architecture and Maya belief. It's worth being clear about what this evidence does and doesn't prove. No inscription or written record has ever been found stating outright that the temple was placed there because of the water beneath it. The link between the cenote and the pyramid's location remains an interpretation built from physical evidence rather than a documented fact. A strong and increasingly accepted interpretation, but an interpretation nonetheless, one that continues to be tested as similar non-invasive surveys are carried out at other sites across the region. Even with everything modern imaging has revealed, researchers have been careful not to overstate their findings. Electrical resistivity tomography doesn't produce a photograph of what's underground. It produces a map of electrical resistance that has to be interpreted carefully against decades of existing excavation records. An anomaly could indicate a chamber. It could indicate a natural void in the limestone. It could simply reflect a shift in building material between different construction phases. Because of that uncertainty, most of the scientists involved describe their findings in careful, conditional language rather than announcing confirmed treasure chambers. That caution also explains why no one has moved to dig down and confirm any of this directly. El Castillo has survived roughly 1,000 years of tropical weather, human activity, and heavy modern tourism while remaining remarkably intact. Cutting into a structure like that to verify a scan carries real risk. It could destabilize a monument that has already been reinforced and restored multiple times, and it could destroy undocumented sections of ancient construction that have never been properly studied. Once that context is disturbed, it can never be perfectly put back the way it was, no matter how carefully the work is documented. That's why modern archaeology at sites of this scale increasingly favors patience over excavation, choosing to map, monitor, and study before ever breaking ground, and to dig only when the evidence overwhelmingly justifies it. It's a strange kind of progress. In a way, the more advanced the scanning technology becomes, the less archaeologists actually need to physically disturb in order to understand what they're looking at. What researchers have confirmed at Chichén Itzá isn't a chamber full of golden treasure. It's something quieter, and in its own way more remarkable. A pyramid built over two earlier pyramids, all three raised above a hidden pool of water that may explain exactly why this spot was chosen in the first place. A temple reaching toward the sky, a plaza representing the world of the living, and an underworld sealed in darkness beneath the foundation, all folded into a single structure by builders who never needed to dig to know exactly what was waiting beneath their feet. And every equinox since, crowds have gathered at the base of that staircase to watch a shadow shaped like a serpent slide toward the ground, with almost none of them realizing that the ground itself has been hollow the entire time.